Hey everybody, good evening. I hope you guys are doing well. You doing okay? Yeah, what rain, right? We are going to have a great time here tonight as we wrap up this series, Come and See, series that we kicked off last week. And again, we acknowledge just this reality that we have for so many of us that we tend to share, to kind of want to talk about the things that we love in our lives. And we do that all the time with all sorts of different things. We do it with restaurants that we go to. We go, man, that was delicious. That was incredible. I got to tell somebody about this. We do it with music that we listen to, maybe concerts we go to. You go, okay, I've heard the album, but you have to see them in person. We come across a book or a podcast and we just go, oh, I know somebody who needs to hear this. I want to share this with somebody else. We do it with our vacations and our pictures of our vacations and everything else in between. And it's just sort of human nature to do things like this. And so what we do is we attempt to explain it, right? Like to put words to this experience and to talk about why it is so special. And I'm going to convince you like why you need to do this and why you need to give it a shot as well. But oftentimes, at least for me, the words that I'm using and even my expressions, it's like that seems to fall flat and people are like, yeah, we'll see. And it doesn't do it justice because what we notice is that there are some things that just need to be experienced and not just explained. And last week, we took a peek at the very, very beginning of the Jesus movement, and we saw that from the initial moments, from the get-go, it was marked by a phrase that came up a number of times. The phrase was, come and see. And so as people, we're hearing others talk about Jesus, and their curiosity as to who this guy was beginning to grow as they saw Jesus for themselves. Jesus gave an invitation. He said, come and see. Come and see the way that I live, and come and see what it is like to follow me. And so they did. And as they did, one of the frequent experiences that they would have is that they would see Jesus and just be blown away. Just maybe confused, but convinced that something was different, something was special about this guy. Some people even perhaps thought, hey, this might be the Messiah, the one that we've been waiting for centuries. And so in turn, these people who Jesus invited to come and see would then find their friends and their family members and the people around them, and they would say, this Jesus guy, this is something else. He's unlike anyone that we've met before, and so you need to experience him. You need to come and see for yourself. And for the earliest followers of Jesus, their goal was not to explain something, but it was to experience someone. And as they did that, they would invite others along in the process to do the same. And in doing so, they found themselves playing a very influential role in the lives of other people. And when it comes to that word influencer, that word has begun to mean something different in the last decade or so than it used to, right? And so for us, when we think of the word influencer, we might think of a designation that is used for people who have a large social media presence or following, right? They've got people who are following them and trying to figure out what they should be listening to and doing. These are people that we go, you know what? They're kind of like tastemakers. Perhaps even the people who are used to promote or to sell products. But one of the things I think is really interesting is that there are people who might have thousands or tens of thousands or even millions of followers, and at the same time, they're viewed less as like trusted authorities and more as entertainment just to kind of watch and to check out. Because when it comes down to it, as you think about the people in your life, it takes a lot to be a true influence in a person's life. I mean, people are constantly encouraging you and me and recommending things that we've got to try out, things we've got to listen to, places we need to go, places that we need to eat, their food from. But we don't weigh those all equally, do we? In fact, there are times where because of who a person is, their taste, maybe their track record or the ways you've experienced them, simply them beginning to make a recommendation, it might instantly propel you in one or two directions, right? There might be somebody you're like, I like their taste. Oh, they have a great track record in the things they recommended before. And so when they say, you've got to, you go, okay, I will. Like, it doesn't even matter you're like, I trust you. I totally will. And others, they're about to tell you to do something, and you're like, I wanted to do it before, but now I'm not going to because I don't trust them, or I've had weird experiences with them. In fact, simply because of who that person is, it might pull us to or push us away from it. There are even times where there are people who we trust their opinion so much that they might invite us to do something that we would never do on our own, and then we find ourselves doing it because, it was them. It was them who invited us, or they were going to be there, and since they're going, I'll give it a shot too, right? I was 15, and I started hanging out with a new group of friends in high school, and I thought they were like the coolest people in the world because, well, they weren't jerks to me, and that was nice, right? So I started hanging out with them, and I respected them. I liked them. I wanted to be around them. And the time came where they invited me to check out a church service and to go with them. And I thought, you know what? I've never done anything like this, and I would not do that on my own. But sure, I mean, like, you guys do this, and you're going to be there, and the way you treat me, like, sure, I'll go ahead, and I'll come and see. And if you think it's worth it for me, I'll give it a try. And for many, we go, you know what? I've had moments like that, where because of somebody that I respected a lot, or the way they've treated me, I've leaned into those moments. And then there are times where we go, you know what, I've had an experience that's been different. And there are actually some people who, you know what, they have zero interest in pursuing matters of faith or discovering or exploring who Jesus is and what he's all about. And it's not because they find him to be, completely irrelevant to their lives or they're repelled by Jesus. No, it's different. It's just because they've had some really negative experiences with some of Jesus' followers who have misrepresented what he is like, and that's left a bad taste in their mouths. See, everywhere Jesus went, more and more people were coming to see him for themselves. But he wanted them to know really the heart behind it all. He didn't want people simply attracted to, the miracles and the perceived spectacle of it all. He wanted them to understand that he was introducing or inaugurating something that was brand new, something that was a new way of living. It was a new way of approaching faith, a new way of relating to their Heavenly Father. It was a way that was marked by grace rather than shame. It was a way where it is marked by humility and healing and forgiveness and the possibility of redemption. And so with his followers surrounding him and the crowds getting larger and larger around him, Jesus, this rabbi, he sits down along a hillside and he begins teaching. But it's more than a quick lesson or a short study. It's this proclamation, this manifesto of sorts. It's a sermon on the hillside that lasts for multiple days. And he starts it out by laying out the responses or the postures that his followers would be called to embrace. These are commonly referred to as the Beatitudes, like the supreme blessedness. And so he begins with these 8 statements. They're 8 ways of living that would define his kingdom, but at the same time, they would stand in direct contrast to the ways of this world. Because Jesus' kingdom that he was introducing, it was a kingdom that would look unlike anything that they'd ever seen or heard of before, and anything we've seen since. And so he launches in to Matthew chapter 5, verse 3. He says, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." And so as Jesus lays these out, we immediately see that his followers, if we would actually live out these responses, well, his followers would stand out from everybody else, because these are values and postures that would be so starkly contrasted from what we see around us in this world. We live in a world that values things like, pride and self-righteousness and power and strength and appearances and sometimes even deception. But they would be characterized by different things, by the opposite. Things like humility, dependence upon God, a recognition of all that's wrong within us and all that's wrong around us, marked by a longing for justice and righteousness and this proactive pursuit of purity and peace. And in these words, Jesus is setting the tone. He's making it clear that following him isn't simply watching a show and going along for the ride, but it is a brand new way of living. And in the words that follow, well, Jesus gives his followers a role to play and two metaphors to explain it. He says, you are the salt of the earth. And when I hear that word salt, you know what immediately comes to mind for me? I think of popcorn. I think of popcorn, and maybe you do, maybe you don't. Maybe you're like, no, it's French fries for me, or it's potato chips. Maybe for you, it might even be salt and pepper. I don't know. We're all a little bit different here. Because for you and I, we live in a world and a time where salt's primary use is to be a seasoning or a flavoring agent, right? And in Jesus' day, it definitely was. It was used in that way. In fact, it had many different uses. One of the uses was that it was used as fertilizer. But one thing that we have to remember is that they lived during a time where there's no refrigeration. And so we're putting things in the fridge and we're going, hey, that's how I'm going to keep it so it doesn't go bad. But there's no refrigeration. And for most of the population, there's not an abundance of food. And so that meant if you found yourself to be fortunate enough to have not just food for today, but food for the future, like, wow, you are blessed, but also you better take care of that food. You got to salt it, because without the salt, it was quickly going to rot and decay. And so salt in their world, it functioned most importantly as a preservative. Jesus says, you are the salt of the earth. But if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It's no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. And some of you, you're like, I'm not much of a salty kind of person. I like the sweet things, but I've never tasted unsalty salt. And so maybe I got to give that a try. And you're like, yeah, that's not a thing, not a thing. What Jesus is saying is salt, it doesn't literally lose its saltiness. It's a way of saying if it stopped being salt, if it lost its purpose and its function, how beneficial would that be? In effect, he's saying, when you look around this world, you're going to see things that are very common in this world. You're going to see the way people live, the injustices that exist, the systems that you go, that is just broken. The corruption that is there at every single level, the evil that seems like it's prevailing. And when you see it all becomes clear that there is significant decay in this world, that things are deteriorating, that's not the original design. But when my followers live out my kingdom values, when my followers are hungry and thirsty for righteousness, when my followers are pure in heart, when they recognize their brokenness and they live humbly in front of others, well, then my followers behave like salt, not simply as a seasoning that brings out the best flavor, but a preservative in the world that helps to slow and prevent decay and deterioration. He continues. He says, you are the light of the world. And we think of light, and several different concepts come to mind for me. We think of how light, it symbolizes purity. And it can be used to refer to truth or knowledge. Like, I saw the light. If we're talking about somebody who's living in the light, we're referring to somebody who, they're not trying to hide things. There's like this openness to the way that they live their lives. Light enables us to see. It removes darkness. It illuminates what's in front of us. And Jesus is saying, yes, those things. That is what you are. This is who you will be in the world as you follow my way. You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. And many of the structures that were built during ancient times were built with limestone. And so as the sun would beam down on it, these structures would reflect very brightly. But then as nightfall came during an era where there's no light pollution from cars and buildings and street lights and the glows of iPhones in front of people's faces, well, their lamps that the city had, they could be seen from afar. And so no matter how dark everything was around it, well, that city would shine brightly, and it could not be hidden. Even more, the Jewish people were considered to be this nation that would provide light, that would show the Gentile world or the non-Jews who God was and what it was like to follow him in his world. And so as the crowds, they're gathering to come and to see what Jesus is like and to come to see what everybody's talking about, Jesus lays out these expectations for his followers. He begins to unpack the ways that the kingdom is completely different. Like everything around is upside down, but this kingdom is right side up. And for those who are wondering whether they would give their lives to following him, right, sitting under his teaching, devoting themselves to imitating the ways of Jesus, he wants them to understand their mission. And so he says, you, my followers, you will be salt on this earth. You will stand out for all the right reasons, but you will slow the decay and deterioration in this world. And you will shine like bright light. You will shine like light in the midst of the darkness. You will be a beautiful city on top of a hill for all to see. And guess what? As you do this, as you live, people will be watching. And people will take notice. They'll be paying attention. And this is your opportunity. This is your opportunity to help them come to know what their Heavenly Father is like. And I see that and I get excited and I'm pumped up. But what I begin to notice is, well, Jesus, he's laying out this blueprint for how his followers will live out their faith and pass along the good news. But I want to notice what Jesus does not actually say here. See, as Jesus is talking, he does not say a few different things. He does not say, hey, people will comprehend your well-formulated argument. Like, that's going to be the thing that my followers are going to be known for. He doesn't say, well, the unbelievers, they're eventually going to relent to your superior intellect because you're all brilliant, right? And that's what's going to draw people towards God. He doesn't say, people will be amazed by your well-structured explanation and be changed from the inside out because of your impeccable choice of words. And don't get me wrong, as I'm saying this and I'm making light of it, I want to be very clear that there are times where every single one of these things and more, they're very, very helpful. And there are also times when these things end up, maybe getting in the way or even pushing others away because we're so focused on this rather than what Jesus has talked to us about. See, what Jesus said is, when you are salt and when you are light, people will consistently see you living out my values in this upside down world. And they will know what it's like to be on the other side of one of my followers. They will know what it's like to be on the other side of you in your service, or you in your integrity, and your love and your selflessness, what it's like to be on the other side of one of my followers' generosity, and all of these things will point them to their Heavenly Father. See, they will come to know what God is like, and they will be drawn to God because they've come to know what you are like and were drawn to you. I mentioned earlier that I began attending this church I went to in high school, and that was the first time that I ever done anything like that. And in fact, during those years, I decided that I was going to come to a place where I would commit myself to doing the best I possibly could to follow Jesus for the rest of my life. And in this local church, I was filled with really great things. There were friends there who were so encouraging, just pushing me towards the direction I wanted to go. And I'm so grateful for that. And I had these mentors and leaders who invested in me and poured into me. And without them, I go, oh, wow, where would I be? And how difficult would it be to figure those things out on my own? And yet, one of the things that I realize is, as grateful as I am for those experiences, within that local church, there were some things that I go, oh, that was different. And maybe you've been at other churches before and you go, you know what? Every local church has its own kind of, distinct personality or DNA, and everything's a little bit different. And one of the defining characteristics that I witnessed within that local church was a desire that was there. And it was a desire to really try to talk people into their belief in Jesus. And maybe you've experienced that before. And so it was really common that we were always having, hosting frequent debates where it was like, hey, we've got to bring the local atheist or the local this or local that, and we're going to debate them. And then people, they'll be drawn to God because of that. And everything was placed in this us versus them light where we had to argue things. And there was a great deal of emphasis that was placed on like how we needed to know all of the answers to people's questions, and even the questions that they have not been asking yet, right? We needed to know those things. And again, I learned so many great lessons that I was a part of that local church. But one of the most difficult yet important lessons that I feel like I process individually is that when you're talking with somebody about something that can be very sensitive, especially when it comes to matters of faith, if you do not show honor and sensitivity, it is very easy for you to be so aggressive that you win that argument, but you lose the person in the process. And while there is absolutely a place for in-depth, honest, respectful, even challenging dialogue about matters of faith, I believe that absolutely. Another belief that I have is that a living example is better than a lengthy explanation. When it comes to sharing who Jesus is, a living example is better than a lengthy explanation. See, robust intellectual conversation that engages the mind is extremely beneficial. And these are especially helpful when they are done in the most even-handed, honoring, unguarded manner possible. There are certain people, and you might be one of them, who are just so gifted and skilled at facilitating these conversations, and I respect and admire and even envy them quite a bit. But as useful as these are, have you ever noticed, maybe you've been frustrated by this reality, that there are times where all the benefits of a conversation or a discussion or even a debate, they seem to be, just taken away in moments, in an instant. And all it really took was for that Jesus follower who was representing Jesus in front of those other people to behave badly. And then their witness is thrown. Their witness is damaged. And maybe it comes across through some hypocrisy or perceived hypocrisy. Or maybe it's a moral failure, whether through an individual or a larger figure. Or maybe it's just something where they go, you know what? I see the way that Jesus follower, that Christian, is so arrogant, and I don't want any of that in my life. And so if that's what it means to follow Jesus, then count me out. As Jesus followers, we want to invite people to not only hear good news, but to experience it through their interactions with us. But if we aren't being good news, there's this serious disconnect. There's a significant barrier that stands in the way. And another way to put it is, if people don't like what they see in us, then they won't come and see with us. Like if people look at our lives and they go, "Oh, that's repelling to me," then they're less likely to actually take our recommendations, our encouragements, our invitation to follow Jesus seriously. And I'm not suggesting that we're being watched 24/7, and the moment that you slip up, kiss your influence goodbye, buddy. That's not the way that it is. People aren't expecting Jesus followers to live flawless, perfect lives. They're expecting, or maybe they're waiting for us to live differently. They're waiting for us to look more like Jesus, or the Jesus that they've heard of, the Jesus that they want to believe in, than everything else that is common in this world. To live lives where the values and characteristics of his kingdom are consistently visible and on display for all to see. The theologian and scholar D.A. Carson, he put it this way. He said, "The norms of the kingdom worked out in the lives of the heirs of the kingdom constitute the witness of the kingdom." So when followers of Jesus follow Jesus' ways, we live out the good news. And he goes on and he gives this specific example of what that might look like, specifically in like a workplace environment. He says, such Christians refuse to rob their employers by being lazy on the job, or to rob their employees by succumbing to greed and stinginess. They're first to help a colleague in difficulty, last to return a barbed reply. They honestly desire the advancement of the other's interests and honestly dislike smutty humor, in which all of this would look quite different when compared with typical common behavior, right? Like we know what's normal, and if a follower of Jesus is living out the ways of Jesus, we go, wow, that actually is a bit different. However, he goes on to say that this is not always the case, but when it is, it makes an impact. He says, for a variety of reasons, Christians have lost this vision of witness and are slow to return to it. But in better days, in other lands, the good news of Jesus so transformed men that they in turn became the light of the world. Prison reform, medical care, trade unions, control of a perverted and perverting liquor trade, abolition of slavery, abolition of child labor, establishment of orphanages, reform of the penal code. In all these areas, the followers of Jesus spearheaded the drive for righteousness. The darkness was alleviated, and this, I submit, has always been the pattern when professing Christians have been less concerned with personal prestige and more concerned with the norms of the kingdom. And I read that and I get inspired. What a powerful observation. What an incredible reflection to make. That when followers of Jesus are transformed by the message of Jesus and we live out the ways of Jesus, this world is actually changed. When we concern ourselves less with building our own personal kingdoms and more with advancing the kingdom of heaven, well, then the darkness is alleviated, the decay is addressed, and those looking on take notice and they lean in closer to their Heavenly Father. And so as we acknowledge the importance of our example as Jesus' followers, as we recognize that fair or not, people are determining whether or not they want to come and see based off what they see through us, one of the most helpful places that we might land today is to simply ask ourselves a question of what do others see when they look at my life? What do others see when they see me living my life? Do the norms and the values of Jesus' kingdom flow through me? So as people watch the way I live, and that's on display, am I marked by grace, like utter grace in my relationships, or service, a desire to put others ahead of myself? Am I marked by humility or integrity or a pursuit that's active of justice and peace? Here's another question. Does the way of Jesus shine through in each role that I play? And sometimes it's easy for me to say yes to that when I think of one role that I play, right? It's like, oh, in this area, I think I'm doing okay because I know they're watching and I want to do the right things. But what about in all the roles that we play? Not just your example as a neighbor, but your example as a coworker or as a parent or as a child or as an in-law or a spouse or a student or as a coach. Another question, am I credible? Am I credible? Like, is there hypocrisy in me? Is there any way that I'm living my life where I'm doing damage to the name of Jesus? And as I process that, I go, ooh. Is there any way where I've been given this light and I go, that's a great lamp. Do you have a bowl so I could put it on top of that lamp? Anyway, I'm hiding my light and just going, you know what? I'm a little cautious in just living out my faith in front of others. Or maybe the flip side of that. You go, hey, is there any way that I'm being too aggressive in shining my light and it's repelling others? And then you see the last question, which might be the most important question. Am I putting away my shopping cart before I leave the parking lot? See, if you and I, we want to be influential in other people's lives, if we want to be people who are salt and light, and if we understand that if people don't like what they see in us, then they won't come and see with us, is there anything to address? And so these might be things that you just kind of sit with this week and go, you know what, let me process that. And there are times where I ask myself questions like this and I go, ooh, I don't like what I'm realizing. But if I find something, well, then I have an opportunity to do something with that, right? And we want to be very careful with the witness or the example that we're living. There's a quote, maybe you've heard this. It says, preach the gospel at all times, use words when necessary. It's often attributed to St. Francis of Assisi. He lived about 800 years ago. He probably did not say this quote, but maybe you've heard it before and you go, I like that quote. I like it a lot. It's a beautiful idea. Maybe you say, like, that quote is my style. Maybe it speaks to you where you go, you know what? I want to live my life in such a way where I reflect Jesus so well that if people were only to see the way that I live, there would be nothing on display that it keeps them from going closer to Jesus. There's no obstacle that I'm going to put in front of other people. And you may even feel like, hey, this quote is my style. I'm not much of a talker. I don't really like talking about matters of faith. You know what? To be honest, sometimes it feels really awkward, culturally just like not normal. It feels a little insensitive at times. And let's face it, we've had moments where it's uncomfortable to talk about faith, or it's unwelcome to bring up a subject, and you go, I don't want to be that person. And that's kind of where I gravitate towards as well. And yet, as I read through the example of the earliest followers of Jesus, I go, well, that doesn't always line up with what I see them doing. For them, there was this consistent pairing of deed and word, right? There was this eagerness, this enthusiasm to meet needs and to feed the hungry and to heal the sick and to protect the vulnerable and to include the outcast and look out for those who are unable to look out for themselves. But it was consistently partnered with an explanation for why they were doing that in the first place. There's this great example we see in the book of Acts where there are two Jesus followers, Peter and John, and they encounter a man who is handicapped. This man is filled with probably a sense of hopelessness, maybe even shame. He's used to, day after day, being overlooked and ignored by people, especially religious people, because he's sitting out in front of the temple. He's begging for money, and one day, Peter and John, they pass him by, but they don't actually have money to give to him, but they do know that they have come and they've seen Jesus. And when they saw Jesus, Jesus showed dignity to everyone, and that Jesus always had time for the people that everybody else in culture said, you don't need to make time for them. And so they stop, and they treat this man like a human being, and through the power of God's Spirit working within them, they heal this man. And everybody around is like, we know that guy, and now he's healed, and we've got to come see this, right? We've been ignoring him day after day, and now what just happened? We have to come and see this. And so it gets people's attention. And I love this line in Acts 3, verse 12, where it says, Peter saw his opportunity. He saw his moment right there, and so he steps into it, and he begins to talk about Jesus, and he talks about Jesus in a way where I'm like, I might have said that a little bit differently, and maybe you would have as well, but he's used by God in a very powerful way. Yet Peter and John are thrown into prison by these religious leaders who are just perplexed. They're like, these guys are ordinary men, but they're being used in extraordinary ways. And as this is going on, they start to question Peter and John. And they respond that we just cannot help but to talk about the things that we have seen and we have heard. I mean, we came and we saw Jesus and we were completely changed by him. And now we just want to point other people to him too. And it's wild. It's this fun passage to read. But the thing that strikes me is that if they were not following out the ways of Jesus, if their behaviors and the way they interacted with people and the way they saw whoever was in front of them, if that was not marked by the kingdom values, which always draws people in, they would not have been heard. I mean, they would always have an opportunity to talk. We know people who are really good at talking at people, right? You're like, yeah, they're always saying something. They're just talking past and through people and over people, but nobody's really listening. When your walk and your talk don't line up, you begin to lose credibility and you lose opportunities to be heard. Well, later on in his life, Peter is writing this letter to believers, and he's encouraging them because they're going through some significant suffering, because following Jesus never guarantees comfort or safety. And so he says something to them that I find to be very powerful. He says in 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 15, worship Christ as Lord of your life. Like that's where you start. Live in such a way where the ultimate authority of your life is Jesus. You're trying to do everything you can to live like Jesus. And he says, as you're doing so, if someone asks about your hope as a believer, always be ready to explain it. Always be ready. As you're living out your faith, chances are somebody's going to see that and go, that's different. So tell me why and Peter says, be ready for that. But as you do so, do this in a gentle and respectful way. And Peter knows from his own personal experience that when we live out the way of Jesus, not perfectly, but consistently to the best of our ability, people are pulled in and they're attracted. And chances are they'll be a little bit curious as to why your life looks so different than what is so common in this world. And so he encourages us, as we're being salt and as we're being light in this world, be ready to share why you decided to do that in the first place. Be ready just to be honest and to be open about your story. Maybe to be honest about why you were even interested to come and see in the first place. And then when you did, when you gave it a shot, what'd you see? What did you begin to discover about God or Jesus? What did you discover about yourself? What struggles or issues have you still continued to face? But how has that changed the way that you have done so as you follow Jesus? Just share your story. Be ready for those opportunities. And he says, do this winsomely. Do it respectfully. Don't do it argumentatively. When the followers of Jesus are transformed by the message of Jesus, and we live out the ways of Jesus, the world is changed. In Terra Nova, you and I and we are the salt of the earth, and we are the light of the world. And so may we live our lives and shine our light in such a way that others would see it, that others would be curious, that they would be drawn to us, but not just to us, but they would be directed to their Father in heaven. Let's pray together. Lord, we thank you. Thank you that when we come and we see what you're like, that it is a way that is just different from everything else this world has to offer. That following you is a way filled with hope and with purpose. It's a way of complete forgiveness, a way that changes everything in us. And so as we do our best to follow you, we know we will not be perfect in that, but we want to be consistent. Help us make you the leader of our lives. Please use us and remind us that others are watching. And so excite us with the privilege that it is to shine brightly in a world that we know is so dark at times. And help us to invite others to a journey towards you. We want to do this. We want to do this well. We want to do it individually. We want to do it collectively because we want others to come and to see you. Amen.
Thank you, Scott. You know, this idea of being salt and light, of being something that's actually good and helpful and beneficial in the world, not just individually, and that's really important, but collectively as well, that we are the presence of something that actually helps people, that does good in the world around us, that makes everything around us better. That's like a passion for us. That's a passionate commitment for who we are as Terra Nova, who we are as a community. It's like how we see ourselves. It's part of our DNA, and it is why we do so many of the things that we do around Terra Nova all year long. And for example, it's why some of the things that are in your program are happening the way you're happening. So in a few weeks, we've got this thing called Snowfest, and we're partnering with the city of Lake Forest. And how this came about is for a number of years, we've had our own snow day. We get a bunch of tons of snow, and we invite people like, hey, come. And it did not escape our notice that we lived near a city. Some of us live in this city, Lake Forest, where they have a huge event. They get like hundreds of tons, I don't know how many tons of snow. It's massive on what they call Mount Pittsford. And it's like thousands and thousands of people in our community are going there. And rather than doing our own thing where we say, hey, we want to do our thing here and have you come here, we thought, how much better would it be if we actually joined the city in what they did and made their thing better? That's what Salt and Light does. It shows up and makes stuff better. It's helpful. It's good. You're glad it's there. And so we asked them, and they were like, you would partner with us? We'd love that. And so we're like an official partner of the event. And we told them, we will bring volunteers. They said, you can bring volunteers? Like your people would come and serve our city? And we're like, yeah, we do that all the time. They were a little surprised by that. So here's the deal. We committed ourselves to 30. That's so easy. We're going to blow that out of the water. We need 10 people in 3 different shifts. The whole thing happens between like 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. or so, 3 different shifts. The shifts are about an hour and 15 minutes. We need 10 for each of those. And then we're going to have our own booth there, and we're going to do fun stuff for kids. I think we're talking about doing some face painting and maybe balloon animals, just Salt and Light, just making stuff better, just being good in our community. And so you can get into play on that, and you can be Salt and Light with us simply by writing Snowfest on your Connect card. And now you know why we're doing this. Like, oh, that's why we're not having our own snow day, but we're joining with the city and doing their day and making their day better. That's why we're doing this. So take this Connect card, write Snowfest on there somewhere, and get into play, be a part of this. And as you see our year unfolding, you're just going to see opportunity after opportunity after opportunity, and you can connect the dots and go, I know why they do that. I know what's up, like the secret sauce, the behind the curtains thing. This is a community like, oh, we want to be salt and light. That's who we are. And so I want to invite you to get into play on that. So I mentioned this Connect card to you earlier, and you can write Snowfest on there. You can write baptism on there too if you're interested in being baptized. We have that coming up towards the end of the month. And finish working on that. You can throw this in the offering basket on your way out. You can, of course, also throw this life group brochure in the offering basket on the way out. You can also take it home if you still want to sign up, scan that QR code, and you can sign up on our website or on your app if you have the Terra Nova app, and jump into a life group. And of course, you can drop this offering envelope in the basket on the way out as well. And we're entering a new year. We actually ended last year pretty well. I mean, we're pretty stoked about how the year ended, and it's like, wow, that was a very generous last season of our year, and now we're starting a brand new year, and all of these things that we're excited about doing. It's like, this is how we collectively pool our resources to be generous in our world. And so thank you so much. You're like the most generous people in Orange County. We say that all the time. You can drop that in the offering basket. You can also give online. You can give on the Terra Nova app. And as of this week, you can use Venmo. And just look up Our Terra Nova if you're a Venmo person, and you can give that way as well. And then next week, we're kicking off a brand new series that is a great, great come and see moment. It is a perfect series for starting out a brand new year. It's called This Is My Year. Check it out right here. Check this out.
This year, this is my year, our year. Can you feel it? More motivation. 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 Synergy. 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 Adventure. 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 Responsibility. 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 Intimacy. 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 Achievement. 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 Advancement. 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 Determination. 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 Focus. Focus. This is my year.
Honey, so? What do you think? Motivation, integrity, determination, synergy. Come on, honey. You're not even listening to me. I mean, I have a poster and everything this time. This is perfect. I mean business. Jack?
This is my year.
I have no idea how they got that kid to do that, but that is pretty much perfect. And here's the deal. The last few years have been tough. We've come out a year after year going, okay, this is going to be the year. And it's like, yeah, that wasn't really the year. So this is going to be a great year to go, hey, let's dig in. It's going to be a fun series. It's going to be a helpful series. It's going to be a great series for your friends and neighbors and for you. So I hope you come back and join us next week and maybe bring somebody along with you to check this series out. God bless you guys. Have a fantastic week, a great Martin Luther King Jr. weekend, and we'll see you back next weekend for our new series, This Is My Year. I promise.